Hey guys, another video for our how to do stuff in Japan playlist, and it's another one of those heads up videos. Not really how to do something, it's more of a what to expect sort of thing for anybody who might be coming to spend some time in Japan. This is a fairly classic example of what you might expect sometimes. So Sunday is a day where we manage to avoid too much responsibility. So we tend to try and keep Sunday for a bit of a family day. It's not a religious thing, it's just a logistics thing. It's a logistics thing that Sunday happens to be a day where we don't have many obligations, so we keep it for ourselves to relax and have fun and do stuff together. And so we sort of guard it a bit. We're a bit defensive about Sundays. And so Sunday morning, we're having a quiet morning, and there's a sumasen, and go out and there's ID tag man with his pointy shoes. So anybody here who works for anybody, usually the good dudes usually dress in their, we showed that on the fashion playlist, what they wear. They're super pointy shoes and they're cord around their neck with their ID on it, big ID thing, usually lots of small print, nobody can read. And there he is standing at the door with a big bag. Yes. And this is one of those things, we talk all the time about being polite to people and trying to be polite and be patient. And this is one of those circumstances where they catch you off guard, and it makes it that much harder when they catch you off guard, you're not expecting it and just not happy about it. Turning up at the house on Sunday morning, uninvited. Yes, what do you want? And assuming he was a salesman, because we've actually told you all that on previous videos too, that there's no sort of rules here about when salesmen can come knocking on your door. They can sort of do it any time. And they do. So sort of thought it was a salesman. No, I'm from City Hall, he says. I'm from City Hall, and launches into this long-winded explanation. The old setsuman. The big long setsuman. And the way of talking, particularly when talking in a situation like that, when they're talking to a, not a customer in this case, is it? But in a sort of a formal sort of way, the way of talking is really roundabout. It's really roundabout. It's not direct at all. It's not direct and simple and clear. It's this really big roundabout way of talking, and it's like he's going on and on. It's like, you got what? You've got what you want? You've got what that we've got to do? What have we got to do? And then I said to him, do we have to do this thing? Yeah, it's a rule, he said. Rule. It's a rule, you have to do it. What is it? And he's sort of going on and on and on and on. And I said, is there paper that goes, oh, look at this. Can you see, guys? Can you guys see it? It was a little rodent. Did you see that? It was a, whatever that was. It could have been a ferret, couldn't it? We'll have a look at that later, close up, eh? So yeah, big setsuman, and as I said, is there paper that goes with this to explain it? And yes, because quite often what you can do in these circumstances is get them to give you the paper, and then you can just see what it is for yourself without the big long explanation. And yes, and he goes through his bag and he pulls out the one with our name on it and hands it over. Big thick envelope. All right, okay, thank you. And then off he goes, right? And it turns out that it's the census. It's the census, and we get one every 5 years. They have a sort of a smaller one, and then 5 years later they have a big one, and then 5 years later they have a small one again. And this is the bigger one, and the thing's all packaged up in this envelope, so it can just be left at the door. It doesn't need a setsuman, It could have been posted, and again, this is just one aspect of this video, is the wastage. They're sending staff out to every house in the town, right? Which means if they're probably doing it throughout the state, so they're probably doing it to every house, everywhere. Sending people to door, where they've got the thing packaged up already to be posted. It could be posted the way it is. It's got your name and address on it. You open the envelope, it's got all the information in it, and it's got a return envelope in there so you can send it back. So it doesn't need to be hand delivered, and it certainly doesn't need the big long setsuman. It's so typical. We've been talking about this a lot in our household recently, is how much talking goes on before anything gets done. The government's a classic for that. They say, we're considering this and we're talking about that. we've been considering this, and next week we'll be talking about it, and then we'll be considering it, and they go on and on and on with all this stuff before something gets done. And this was a classic example. The big, long sesame that was totally unnecessary, because we open up the envelope, and in it are pages and pages of sesame, right? A longer version of what he said, basically. So everything that he said was already written down inside the envelope, right? And pages of pages. And they never have just a really clear format with the pages all put together. They have multiple inlays, right? So multiple pieces of paper with the information all over the bits of paper. So you've got to go through each bit of paper and what's this one about? What's this one about? What's this one about? One was just about the rule and the penalties for not completing it and returning it, or for not completing it fully, or for not completing it accurately. The penalty was up to $5,000. So God you money. So about $5,000 for not returning it, not completing it, or not completing it accurately. Right. So yeah, right. And then pages and pages of explanation, and then the census itself was pages and pages of census. So census is quite common, isn't it? People have been doing. I mean, the Romans used to do it, didn't they? So they've been doing it in societies for thousands of years, and they are important because from the census they can work out how many schools they need, how many hospitals they need, aged care and child care, kindergartens. They can work all those things out from the information they get from a census, right? So we understand that and we respect that, and that's fine. But just the Japanese way with the wasting of the time, wasting of the time with the big long sesame, banging on the door on a Sunday morning, that in itself, right? Banging it on our door, or calling out outside our door on a Sunday morning was the first thing, and then the big long sesame, and then the pages and pages of explanation. Most of it's unnecessary, and then pages of census. And there's, we understand why they do it, but, we had to complete all the questions for everyone in the household. And some of the questions, were just sort of really unnecessary. Like, we understand age and sex and all that sort of stuff's important. Oh yeah, just for those of you who are into political correctness, we've talked before about there's no political correctness in Japan. The options are male or female. There's no other option, right? You got to be male or female in Japan. You don't have a third option. And then age and all that sort of stuff. That's fair enough. The name of your employer now. When it starts to get into stuff like that, it's like, well, why is that relevant to the city? Because our age and sex and all that sort of stuff, feeding that into a computer obviously is fairly useful information for the city to have for hospitals and childcare and things. But when it starts to get to the name of your employer and how long you've been employed by that employer and what you do with that employer and all that sort of stuff, and then your level of education, and there's a whole heap of questions about level of education. How high did you go? Elementary school, junior high school, university, and then, did you finish your education before Heisei 18, right? Because anytime you get a question like that, it's Japanese calendar, right? So we're going to break out Heisei 18. How long ago was that? We're going to break out our calendar and have a look at Heisei 18 and do the math. The Christian calendar is so much easier, isn't it? Did you finish your education before 1990? That's a fairly easy thing to know, isn't it? But yeah, Heisei 18. Oh, okay. Wait a minute. Yeah. So and that sort of questions like that sort of became a bit like, why is that relevant? Why is that relevant? Why do they need to know that? That doesn't seem relevant. So anyway, we did it. We sent it back because we don't want the $5,000 penalty for not doing it, But yeah, just thought a few aspects of that, because having lived in, having lived in Australia, of course, we have census there too, and in fairness, they do come to the door in Australia as well. They used to. Don't know if they still do, but they used to come to the door. But it's just the whole way, if you turned up at a door in Australia on a Sunday morning, you'd get a pretty cold reaction, but just turning up on the sumasen, and what do you want? What do you want? And then the big setsume. See, the difference is that, and we've talked about this so many times before, the Japanese way of thinking is that the setsume is important, and it shows that you're taking care and that you're doing your job thoroughly, and you're explaining everything. And in fairness too, a lot of Japanese people need the setsume, want the setsume. They feel lost without the big explanation, you know. And so it's just a part of Japanese culture that there's always got to be the big explanation, you know. Whereas some of us from other cultures, our thinking is the less time that they take of it, less of our time that they take, the happier we are, right? If you've already written all the setsume down, don't bother repeating it all to me, you know. And that's classic. We get that all the time. They will sit with you. We've had this lots of times with different, you know, banks, post office, all sorts of different people, where they bring out the form and then go through and read it to you. You know, we told you about that with buying a house in Japan. The guy will sit there and read, and Japanese contracts like 50 pages or something, and the dude sits there and reads it to you. Instead of just giving it to you and say, have a read of this, or just have a look at this, it's a standard form. The only thing that's different is the front page, which is what you get in some other countries. Here they read that standard form. They'll actually read whole pages to you and then tell you, but that's not relevant to you, right? He did that quite a lot. He'd read the whole page and get to the bottom and say, but that's not relevant to you because that doesn't apply in this case, right? But you know, he's being thorough. He's reading every page to us, and he's being thorough. 2.5 hours that took to read the real estate contract to us. So yeah, it's a test of patience, and it's really hard. But you know, it's really hard. You try to be flexible and go, yeah, okay. But you know, coming from different cultures where, you know, privacy was the thing that kept coming up. I kept reading these things thinking, that's not relevant to the city. Why do they care about that? Or what possible use would that information have to the city? There's a lot of stuff in there like that. You know, how can that information help the city in any way? You know, and making it all compulsory too, of course. That sort of, you know, things like that are made compulsory sort of rubs you up the wrong way. Don't complete this form accurately and you get a $5,000 penalty, you know, that sort of thing. So anyway, it's all good. Completed the form, good citizens. Completed the form and sent it back. So we've done our duty. We've done our thing. We followed the rule. So again, if you're coming to Japan for any period of time, you're likely to run into this sort of thing. Random people turning up at your door asking you questions about everything. Anyway, there it was. Hopefully of use to one person. We always figure with the how-to videos, if one person finds it useful information, it was worth making it. There it was. More videos coming soon.